All right. Um, we talked about how hormones affect cell behavior, and water soluble and lipid soluble, they affect it differently. Okay, so let's change gears a little bit and let's go to the how this endocrine system works. And so the way I look at it is, in this whole endocrine system, there's like a control center. And the control center in the endocrine system is the hypothalamus. So you see here, it's like in the brain. Um, Here's the hypothalamus. It's not really showing it to you, but it's like kind of right here where I'm circling. Here's the pituitary gland. And you notice there's two lobes to it. There's a anterior and a posterior lobe. And so the posterior lobe is a lot easier than the anterior lobe. We're going to start with the anterior lobe. So here's how it works. Your body's monitoring things. So I'll give you an example. Your body is monitoring your metabolism. Is it too high? Is it too low? We like to keep things nice and even, right? Homeostasis. We want to keep it all balanced. So if your metabolism goes too high or too low, that is going to trigger some receptors in your body, and those receptors are going to tell your hypothalamus, hey, hypothalamus, metabolism is going too slow. Right? So the hypothalamus is like the CEO, like the control center. So it gets this message that metabolism is not in its normal range. And so what it does is that it's going to send a signal to the pituitary gland. And it's going to tell the pituitary gland is like middle management, right? So the CEO doesn't go to the factory floor and give orders, right? It's got a dude that goes and does that, right? So that's the pituitary. Hypothalamus is going to send a chemical right into the blood here. It's going to come down here, and it's going to tell the pituitary gland, hey, something's up with the metabolism. Metabolism's too low. Well, there's a gland that's responsible for that. It's the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is responsible for making the hormones that regulate your metabolism. So thyroid's not doing its job. That's the problem. And so your body picked up on that, the fact that your thyroid's not doing the job. It told the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus then sends a chemical down to the the anterior pituitary, and it tells this lobe here, hey, thyroid's not doing its job. Go fix it. Go tell the thyroid to do its job, right? And so then the anterior pituitary makes another hormone, and it's going to go in here. See, like these arrows, you follow the arrows, and it's going to go down and make its way eventually to the thyroid gland. And it's going to tell the thyroid gland in your neck, hey, make more thyroid hormone. Metabolism's way too low here. So it's kind of like that. And then once the thyroid makes enough hormone, the whole thing stops, right? If there's no problem, if you have homeostasis, then nobody's going to say anything to the hypothalamus. Then the hypothalamus won't say anything to the pituitary, and the pituitary won't say anything to the thyroid gland. Right? So that's, in other words, that's called negative feedback. Right? Once the problem's solved, that's it. You've cut that loop. But as long as there's not enough thyroid hormone, then the hypothalamus is going to tell the pituitary. The pituitary is going to, in turn, lean on the thyroid gland until those thyroid levels are up. So we're going to start with the anterior portion of the pituitary gland. It makes 7 hormones. We just talked about one. The one that we talked about is called thyroid stimulating hormone, right? It's a hormone that stimulates the thyroid and tells it to make its hormones. So I made a list here. There's 7 hormones. They're all right here. And there's 5 different types of cells that are responsible for making these 7 hormones. And so I listed all the cells: somatotroph, lactotroph, thyrotroph, gonadotroph, corticotroph. So some of these words, when you see somato, you think of something like growth. Lacto, that's pretty easy. You're thinking like something about milk. Thyroid. Gonads. Cortico, you're going to think of like cortisone, cortisol, steroids, things like that. Okay, so here's the hormones. And it's okay, and I encourage you to use these abbreviations. You don't have to write the words out. You don't have to write human growth hormone. Just use the abbreviations everyone else does. So, human growth hormone, this one here is prolactin. So it already tells you what that does, right? Prolactin is going to be responsible for milk production. TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. It's a hormone that stimulates the thyroid. We just talked about that one. This one, follicle stimulating hormone, that is going to go to the testes or the ovaries. LH, same thing. It goes to the testes or the ovaries. And it does, they do different things. So like in me, these are going to go to my testes. They're responsible for different things. This one, luckily, we only need to know the abbreviation. So it stands for adrenocorticotropin hormone. It's made by your adrenal glands, and I mean this is going to be the target is the adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys. This is going to cause steroids to be released. MSH goes to another place in your brain. It stands for melanocyte stimulating hormone. That's going to go to a gland called the pineal gland in your brain. Just know what it is. I'm not going to really ask you about it because we don't know for sure what it does. So these are the 7 anterior pituitary hormones. You absolutely have to know them. So do memorize them. Do memorize the cells that make them. Because I'd like for you to learn these words because sometimes they call these things by different names. But like you might see the word somatotropin in something and they'll call it somatotropin instead of growth hormone. But anyway, these are the cells. So there's 5 different cells in the anterior pituitary. They make these 7 hormones. These 7 hormones, though, are not going to be released until the hypothalamus tells it to release it. So remember, the hypothalamus controls the pituitary. It makes a hormone telling the pituitary to release your hormone. So they're called releasing hormones. So the hormones that the hypothalamus make, they all end in RH, releasing hormone. They are here. So these are the hormones that the hypothalamus releases that go to the pituitary to tell it to release these hormones. So, for example, growth hormone, human growth hormone, will not be released by the anterior pituitary until it gets this hormone, growth hormone releasing hormone. Or TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, doesn't get released by the pituitary until it gets thyrotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. And again, just like we're abbreviating these, you can abbreviate these as well, right? So prolactin releasing hormone, thyrotropin releasing hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone. You don't have to worry about saying all of that. You could just write the abbreviation, CRH. So those are the releasing hormones. So there's kind of like 3 things to memorize here. 1, the cells of the anterior pituitary. 2, the hormones that they make. Here are the hormones here. 3, the releasing hormone that triggers this hormone. So, oh yeah, this one will be quick. So we'll go into the posterior pituitary. So this is a question, you know, um, one of these 2 slides I'm going to ask you about, right? So name the pituitary hormones and the cells that make them, or the releasing hormones which will cause the release. And that is the anterior pituitary. Posterior is a lot easier, right? That's it. Here's the hormones: ADH and oxytocin. Right. So in hospitals, they call this vasopressin, vasopressin. And I think I've got a thing where I talk about what it does. Yes, I don't. All right. Well, look, just to kind of go quick, this is what antidiuretic hormone, ADH, this is what it does. It's all about keeping blood pressure up. So let me explain that. When you're dehydrated, you have literally less blood in your body. So when you get dehydrated, your blood loses water, plasma. And so when you have less blood in your body, the pressure of that blood goes down. And so why would your blood pressure go down? Because you're dehydrated, right? So antidiuretic hormone is going to kind of work against that. It's going to mitigate that or compensate for the fact that you're dehydrated. And so there's some tricks that your body has. And the main thing that it can do is stop peeing. You're dehydrated, stop peeing, right? Well, you can't really stop peeing altogether because you got to get rid of all the crap in your body. And so that's why your kidneys make urine in the first place. But you can control how much water goes in that urine. So that's what ADH will do. So you ever notice that when you drink a lot of water, your urine is like clear, and when you're dehydrated, your urine's like nasty smelling and dark yellow? That's ADH working, or vasopressin. That's what it's doing. It's telling the kidneys to use the least amount of water that it can when it makes urine. So that's one way of conserving water in your body. But another issue we have is we have to get the blood pressure up, because when you're dehydrated, blood pressure goes down. So how do we get blood pressure up? Squeeze the blood vessels. That's why the other name for ADH is vasopressin. Squeeze the blood vessels. Vasoconstriction, in other words. Right? So you want to constrict the muscle. Your blood vessel, a lot of your blood vessels have muscles in them. And so we want to constrict that muscle and constrict the blood vessel, and that's automatically going to make the pressure go up. And then, yes, we want to sweat a little bit less, right? But the main 2 things are right here. Squeeze the blood vessels to make the blood pressure go up, vasoconstriction, and decrease the amount of water that's put in urine. So that is what ADH does. It's a response to being dehydrated. You don't have to memorize all of this. I just want you to know what it does. And oxytocin, it's going to cause uterine contractions. Like while you're giving birth, it helps with uterine contractions, and it's ultimately going to allow the milk that you're producing to be ejected into the milk duct. Right, so that's it. So that is the anterior and the posterior pituitary glands. You have another set of questions here, so you should know what antidiuretic hormone does. You should know that it's made by the hypothalamus and it's stored in the posterior pituitary. You should know this slide, and you should know this slide. And I'm going to end this one here.